I don't need my notes for this. I'm so, Saburo and Marion Masada, I cannot tell you how happy I am that you have the privilege of meeting them today. They have been speaking in all my classes for many years, at least probably 13 years or more. And it's just such a privilege to welcome them here today. So without further ado, please put your hands together and welcome our very special guests, Saburo and Marion Masada. Be sure to take notes, those of you that don't have anything to write with.
Thank you, Dr. Hussain. Marion and I are so grateful to Dr. Hussain for inviting us to all their classes every year. And it's because of educators like her that we're able to share our stories in our universities and even our high schools and some grammar schools. So by word of mouth, they hear about our speaking here and word gets around and we get invited. And I want to thank you students for the privilege of having you listen to our presentation. Our presentation is about America's history that our government has kept silent for decades. It's what happened when Japan bombed our country. And our president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, signed Executive Order 9066, which authorized Lieutenant General John DeWitt to remove from our homes, our jobs, our schools, our communities, 120,000 Americans and legal residents living primarily on the West Coast, but only of Japanese ancestry. Our only crime was our face. We looked like the enemy that bombed our country at Pearl Harbor. We were imprisoned in 10 concentration camps scattered in 7 different states, primarily away from the West Coast. There were 2 in Northern California, certainly not 2, one in Northern California and one in southern, eastern California. This is General John DeWitt. Sadly, he was a racist. He said that the Japanese race was an enemy race, and therefore, if you had any Japanese blood in you, you were apt to be loyal to Japan rather than to our beloved America. When DeWitt posted his order for the 120,000 of us to be removed from our homes and our West Coast area, he put up his order, and his order starts out, all persons of Japanese ancestry, both aliens and non-aliens. I think we all know what an alien is, but what's a non-alien? From outer space? He meant American citizens, and he didn't have the guts nor the integrity to at least write aliens and American citizens, but he put non-aliens. So, you know, if you're an American, you're a non-alien according to DeWitt. We were sent to 10 different concentration camps scattered in 7 states. Originally, we were put in temporary quarters like racetracks or stalls, and for up to 6 months. And then we were, the permanent concentration camps were still being built. And so we were moved after they were mostly completed. In 1990, I think 1998, the Ellis Island Immigration Museum wanted the Japanese American National Museum in Los Angeles to put up a display as to what happened to us in 1942 when we were put into the camps. And so the National Museum came up with a big display entitled America's Concentration Camp, Remembering the Japanese-American Experience. And understandably, the Jewish groups in New York objected to the use of the word concentration camps. We understand that. But the two groups, representatives of the National Museum and Jewish groups, they discussed it for a couple hours, and they came to the agreement that the word concentration camp was the correct terminology, rather than what the government was using, which I'll go over in a minute. So as not to confuse the attendees at the museum, where they saw American concentration camps, they posted a footnote on the poster, also printed it in the printed program so that the people would understand why we were using the word concentration camp. And this is the footnote. A concentration camp is a place where people are imprisoned, not because of any crimes they have committed, but simply because of who they are. Nazi camps were places of torture, barbarous medical experiments, and some were executions. Some were extermination centers with gas chambers, but all had one thing in common. The people in power decided to remove a minority group from the general population, and the rest of the society let it happen. So the word concentration camp was accepted as a proper terminology to use. Our government used words like relocation, evacuation, internment, and the National Japanese American Citizens League had a big debate over the use of terminology, and they came to the conclusion that the words had to be corrected. That is, the government terminology was not correct. Relocation camp and internment camps are not the words we want people to use for describing the camps we were in. We were in prison. We were prisoners. We were incarcerated. You know, the Oroville Dam was at 27, when it was ready to break. They were afraid it was going to break. They evacuated and they relocated thousands of people downstream so that their lives would be protected. Our lives were not evacuated and relocated to protect us. We were put into these camps, and the guards in the guard towers had guns pointed at us. They weren't pointed at people who might hurt us, but they were pointed at us. We were imprisoned in these camps. The word internee is for an alien of a country with which we are at war. That's an internee. I know we use student interns, medical interns, and get a little confused as to what an internee means. And I guess that's why it doesn't really faze people when we say we were internees. But if you say we were prisoners, that's different. 2/3 of the 120,000 of us who were in prison were American citizens. We weren't aliens. We were Americans. And so we were not in an internment camp. We were in a concentration camp. Our friend Dr. Tetsuden Kashima of the University of Washington told us, whoever controls the vocabulary controls the narrative. And the government controlled the vocabulary for too long, and so the narrative was controlled by the government. And so the real story of what happened to us was not revealed to our American public. well, we were evacuated, we were relocated. They didn't say we were imprisoned or we were put into concentration camps. And so that's why we feel it's very important that we use correct terminology, or else we perpetuate the government cover-up of what really happened. This famous quotation by George Santayana, those who forget the past are condemned to repeat it, and we don't want to repeat what we did back in 1942. And so it's important that we understand what really happened, lest we repeat it again. We need to know that when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, that was the moment when suddenly America had this racist attitude of Japanese. No, 40 years before Japan even bombed Pearl Harbor, there was a concerted effort to get rid of all the Japanese people living on the West Coast. After the Chinese Exclusion Act of 73? The people on the West Coast wanted cheap labor, so they started to bring them from Japan. And as soon as they start to arrive in early 1900, this anti-Japanese movement and the Yellow Peril and this greed about not wanting to share what could be done here on the West Coast came up again. And so effort was made to try to get rid of every Japanese living on the West Coast. And this effort continued on for 40 years, up to the time Japan bombed their country. So this anti-Japanese movement didn't start with Pearl Harbor. It started way back, 40 years before Pearl Harbor. In 1905, 67 organizations met in San Francisco to form the Asian Exclusion League. And their sole purpose was to promote and get rid of the Japanese people living on the West Coast. In 1913, the California Alien Land Law was passed, one of several laws to try to keep the Japanese population from growing and to stop the presence of the Japanese people on the West Coast. And of course, 1924, Congress stopped all immigration to Japan. Even the newspaper, 1915, had a series of articles saying that we should get rid of all the Japanese people living on the West Coast. But this 40-year campaign by the end of 1940 was failing. 42% of all the commercial truck crops were grown by Japanese American farmers. 90% of all the vegetables are grown by Japanese American farmers. So this effort to get rid of the Japanese was failing. But when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, that was a perfect opportunity to exploit the fears and hysteria of war to accomplish what these anti-Japanese factions had been trying to do for 40 years, but were failing in their efforts. So they began to tell lies and rumors that we Japanese Americans were spying, we were lying, we were sabotaging. And sadly, General DeWitt was a racist. He swallowed hook, line, and sinker all these lies and rumors that were going around. There's no evidence of it, but he believed all that because of these propaganda that was being spread about us. During World War II, I think there were 18 spies who were arrested. None of them were of Japanese ancestry. 1942 was also election year. Our famous civil rights Chief Justice Earl Warren, would you believe that in 1942, when he was campaigning to be governor of California, he said, The very fact that the Japanese people had not committed any crime is proof that they will when the right time comes. Isn't that good logic? The very fact that you haven't done anything wrong is proof that you're going to do it. But he got his votes. He was elected governor of California in 1942. Without any due process, without any evidence, General DeWitt, believing the lies and rumors that were spread about the Japanese living on the West Coast should all be removed. And he had President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, which gave him the authority to do that. Now this is General Emmons of Hawaii. Hawaii had 158,000 people of Japanese ancestry living there, but he disagreed with DeWitt's racist order, and he refused to do what DeWitt was asking him to do. There were 3 brave Americans who defied General DeWitt's orders. Gordon Hirabayashi, Hide Yasui, and Fred Korematsu, all 3 of them refused to comply, but they were arrested and they were put into the prison also. I want to tell you about Fred Korematsu's arrest. This is Peter Irons, a legal historian. He went to government archives to look up the government files on the 1944 Supreme Court trial of Gordon Hirabayashi, of Fred Korematsu. Actually, all 3 of those men the cases came up to the Supreme Court. But I want to tell you about the Fred Korematsu's Supreme Court trial. Peter Irons opened this box of government files, and on the top manila folder was a memo. A memo from the Justice Department lawyer to Charles Fahey, this fellow here, who is the top attorney of our country, who defends our country in cases like this before the Supreme Court. I want to tell you about what this memo was about. 2 Justice Department lawyers wanted to give to Charles Fahey the facts so that when he appeared before the Supreme Court, he would have the facts to present about DeWitt's claim that the Japanese on the West Coast were spying and sabotaging, and therefore they were dangerous to national security, and for military necessity, they should all be in prison. What happened was when they asked the intelligence agencies throughout our country to come up with evidence and facts, there weren't any. In fact, the FCC chair and the Office of Naval Intelligence and other authoritative intelligence agencies categorically denied that the Japanese Americans had committed any wrong, and they all opposed the mass incarceration. But the outcry of the public and these anti-Japanese factions whipped up the anti-Japanese movement, and DeWitt just went along with all these lies. This is a memo that was given to Charles Fahey before he appeared before the Supreme Court. The memo said, "We are in possession of information that shows that the War Department report on the internment is a lie. And we have an ethical obligation not to lie to the Supreme Court, and we must decide whether to correct that record." So what do you think our U.S. top attorney did before he appeared before the Supreme Court? He just ignored the memo completely. Instead, he said that DeWitt's final report, which was actually revised because it was full of racist remarks and contrary facts, that they had to revise it. And the 10 copies that DeWitt had published, which he wasn't supposed to do. He was supposed to just give the manuscripts first, but he put 10 hard copies of his report. And so the War Department had to destroy all 10 copies and come up with a revised version. How we know that this happened was that one of the 10 copies was never found. They couldn't locate it, so they couldn't be destroyed. But in the 80s, that one copy showed up, and it showed the words crossed out, words in the margin, to show that his original report had been revised by the War Department. And so the one they finally published was not fully DeWitt's original report. They made DeWitt sign it. He said, "That's not my report." He said, "Okay, then you don't have a report." So he had to sign it. And Charles Fahey used that revised report before the Supreme Court. When in the 80s, these misconduct by the Supreme Court was discovered, by the government was discovered, Fred came out to appeal his case again in 1983 at the district level in San Francisco in the federal court. And I was able to attend that trial. I remember the courtroom was packed, and the government lawyers and Korematsu's lawyers gave their case, and Judge Marilyn Patel said, "I'll call a recess, and when I resume the trial, I'll give my verdict." I remember it was dead silent, waiting for her to reconvene. And when she did, she had harsh words for the government lawyers for withholding evidence from the Supreme Court, for destroying evidence, and for lying to the Supreme Court justices. And she vacated Fred Korematsu's conviction, and subsequently the other two convictions are also reversed. Quite a few years later, one of the Korematsu lawyers was in Fresno, and the lawyer said, "You were at that trial. Tell me how you felt when the courtroom erupted with shouts of victory." I said, "I don't remember that, but I do remember that overwhelming feeling I had when Judge Patel gave her verdict. That I was hearing for the first time with my own ears a representative of my government saying that we Japanese Americans were put into these concentration camps on a lie by General DeWitt and the War Department." In early 1980s, Congress established a congressional commission to investigate how such a tragedy could happen in our great democracy. And so the Congressional Commission investigated, and they came out with a report in this book, Personal Justice Denied. And in it, it stated, "Unhappily, the false claims and stories on the West Coast in 1942 made respectable opinions. The old prejudicial propaganda of the anti-Japanese faction, unopposed, had won the day." And the conclusion of the investigation is this: the promulgation of Executive Order 9066 was not justified by military necessity, were not driven by an analysis of military conditions. The broad historical process which shaped this decision were race prejudice, war hysteria, and failure of political leadership. And I always add, for emphasis, the prejudice and the economic greed of the South-interest groups, beginning 40 years before Pearl Harbor, exploiting the fears and hysteria of World War II, and spreading lies and rumors that we were spying and sabotaging, hoping finally to get rid of all the Japanese from the West Coast. I want to conclude this part of our presentation by quoting the memoirs of some of our nation's leaders who supported General DeWitt's order. Justice William Douglas said, "The mass incarceration was ever on my conscience." Milton Eisenhower described the forced removal to concentration camps as an inhuman mistake. Milton was a brother of our president, Dwight Eisenhower. Milton was appointed director in March of 1942 of all the 10 concentration camps. 3 months later, he resigned, saying, "I was sick of the job and I had a hard time sleeping at night." I think he listened to his conscience. We asked Chief Justice Earl Warren to recant his support for the incarceration in 1942, but I was told that he was so emotionally upset that he couldn't respond. But in 1977, in his memoir, this is what he wrote: "I have since deeply regretted the removal order and my own testimony advocating it, because it was not in keeping with our American concept of freedom and the rights of citizens. Whenever I thought of the innocent children who were torn from home, school friends, and congenial surroundings, I was conscience-stricken. It was wrong to react so impulsively without positive evidence of disloyalty." I appreciate his writing this memoir in 1977. But he didn't mention the adults. The adults lost their job, they lost their career, they lost their leadership in our communities, and when they were put all in the concentration camps and released those who were still in the camps in 1945, they were given $25 and a ticket to somewhere. Many had nowhere to go. They had to get rid of their property and everything they owned on the West Coast, some in 48 hours, some 2 weeks, some for a month. But there was no way they could safely and securely have someone take care of the property. Many just had to leave it behind. The government had a phone. They said they will store the big thing because all we could take was what we could carry with our 2 hands, like 2 suitcases. So everything else had to be sold for 10 cents on the dollar or just given away or left. But the government said, "We'll store it for you if you sign this at your own risk." Many of those storage places were burned. They were stolen, ransacked. And so Mary will tell you what happened to the things that they had stored later on. Supreme Court Justice Tom Clark said, "Looking back on it today, it was a mistake." Mistake? I call it a crime. 120,000 innocent people were put into the concentration camps for up to 4 years on a lie by General DeWitt and the War Department. That's no mistake. Share with you her story and with my wife, Marion.
I am a survivor of America's concentration camp. My citizenship didn't protect me, and our Constitution was reduced to a scrap of paper. We Americans living in southern Arizona, California, Oregon, and Washington were uprooted and disappeared from our homes and put into 16 temporary detention centers located on fairgrounds, and then transferred to 10 of America's permanent concentration camps. Most of us were under 21 years of age. We had no power, no voice, and no one to speak up for us. Before I share my story, I need to share our Japanese culture the way Saburo and I were raised as children. These are the words that were drilled into us. Haji, I am not to bring shame, disgrace, or dishonor on my family, community, and country. This also means we are to respect people, or we would bring shame on our family. Gaman, I am to endure, persevere with patience, dignity, and fortitude. Shikataganai, I must accept things as they are when they cannot be changed and just move forward. Endio, I am to be reserved, modest, act in humility, and put others first. Owen, I am to show honor and responsibility, a sense of grateful obligation and debt of gratitude to family, community, and country. Kodomono Tame, for the sake of the children, protect them from negative experience and attitude. Our cultural traits had us smiling on the outside, hiding our feelings and hurt and pain. My father was an immigrant from Japan, but my mother was born in Prudendale, California. They were successful truck farmers and doing very well financially. They worked very hard to support their large family. It was a matter of survival. They were at the height of their earning ability in 1941 when they were sent to the concentration camps. I was 9 years old. We did not know where we were going or how long we would be gone. We were only allowed 2 bags per person. My mother, planning ahead, sacrificed 1 bag and filled it completely with Kotex pads for my sister and me when we would have need for it. We were given name tags and a number because we would not be known by our name but by our number. My mother pounded it into our heads that we must know our number because we could get lost. The barracks all looked alike. And I still remember our number, 13141. From Cool Salinas, we were transferred to the permanent camp, Poston Camp 2 in Arizona, and arrived in the heat of July when the temperature was 120 degrees. We had dust storms so thick we had to cover our face to protect our eyes and breathing. Our family of 8 lived in 120 by 25 feet room with no partitions, no privacy, no furniture, just army cots and 1 light bulb hanging from the rafters. There was no privacy whatsoever. We lined up to eat in the mess hall, rain or shine. My father was a cook and my mother was a dietitian, preparing foods for new mothers, diabetics, and the sick. So that meant our family never ate as a family throughout the whole time we were incarcerated. Family life was never the same after that, and brothers and sisters were never close after camp. The community bathrooms and showers in each block had no partitions for privacy. These conditions were very painful for us women, and we suffered our shame in silence. I was a Girl Scout. I had 1 close friend. My mother had a baby in camp, so my sister May helped with the baby, and I did all the family laundry, scrubbing and ironing, and I rinsed the clothes twice. I did not have much time to play with other children. I was now 10 years old. One day, my sister's friend invited both of us to her barrack room for the night, and in the night, her father molested me. I could not scream, for nothing would come out of my voice. I kept this incident to myself for many years because I could not talk about it to anyone. I was not able to tell my mother before she died. My whole experience being in camp was traumatic. I was made to feel I started a war. I felt being Japanese was bad. I felt a hurt I couldn't explain. I didn't know how to fight back. I felt hate and it didn't feel good. I was in the 8th grade when we were released from camp in 1945 to go home to Salinas. But we were not allowed to go back there, so we went to Watsonville, the next town over. Mother had left all our belongings, including her wedding gifts that were still new because she was saving it for when she was going to buy a new home for us. We found all our belongings had been looted and ransacked. Nothing was salvageable. We literally had nothing. And so even our car was just a shell. And nobody would rent to us also. So we lived in the Watsonville Buddhist Temple, and it was so crowded that my mother moved us over to the Westview Presbyterian Church, which was a Japanese Christian church. Since we had nothing and had to start all over, we children had to work after school. So I worked as a maid for 2 homes for 50 cents an hour. After 1 year, we moved to San Jose, where my mother found an abandoned home, foul smelling. And then we temporarily found another apricot shed with with just a roof. And so we used the trays all around to make a makeshift home. So I told my mother that I'll work as a maid in a Caucasian home, so you'll have one less mouth to feed and one less body to house. My saving grace was the first day of high school. I met an Italian girl. She had recently moved from Pennsylvania to San Jose because her mother had died, father remarried and wanted to start anew in San Jose. We were the first 2 to arrive in class, and she needed a friend and I needed a friend, and we just clicked and became very close friends. When she found out that I was working during the week and going to school, she invited me to live with her family on my day off, which was Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday. And this family was so wonderful, warm and loving and kind to me, and treated me like one of the member of the family. And their father even gave me an Italian name, Mariucci. And she was a wonderful cook. She made delicious spaghetti, lasagna, polenta, and roast meat of all kinds with rosemary and garlic. It was delicious. And I learned to drink wine with dinner. And I became half Italian and half Japanese by choice. And this family restored my faith in humanity. It showed me very early, which I was very fortunate, that there are good people in this world too. So I did not grow up hating and resenting and being so angry at what I had gone through. It had a big impact on my life. I just want to close with 2 experiences of after camp because it affected my life so much. And that is, I went to, after I finished the 2 years of college, that was all I could afford to do by myself. So I went to San Francisco and went to work at a job and lived with my aunt. And I needed a part-time job to supplement my income. So I went to Milton Mann Photography Studio, and he wanted me to do telephone solicitation. My maiden name was Nakamura. So I said, "This is Miss Nakamura. We have a special for you." Blah, blah, blah. And I gave all the nice spiel. And when I hung up, Mr. Mann said to me, "Your name sounds too foreign. I want you to use a Caucasian name." And I said, "Oh, okay." And I said, "This is Miss Grant. I have a special for you." And by the time I hung up, I was just seething with anger. I had no words for this man. I glared at him and I picked up my bag and I left. Now the second job that I had was, I was now married and had 3 little children. And on a pastor's salary, you need help. And so I went to work as a community aide in an elementary school. I had a mentally handicapped child, so I had to be home. I could not work more than 3 hours. So I went to work as a community aide working with parents, helping them to help their children. And so one day the principal, Mr. Potter, said to me, I want you to do the secretary's job too. By now I am smart. I said, that's not in my job description. And then he said to me, you do it because I tell you to do it. And the superintendent told me to tell you to do it. Well, I said, okay, and I left. And I headed for that superintendent's office, and I said to him, why didn't you tell me that I'm supposed to do the secretary's job too when I'm only 3 hours? How can I do it? He got on the phone in my presence and he said to Mr. Potter, don't you dare use my name like that again. And do you know, in that moment, I experienced something so fantastic. Power just hit me. I felt it so strong. It was as if I had given my power away all this time. And now I had my power back, full strength and most powerful. And that's what helps me to tell my story of pain and shame with you students today. And I hope you learned something from it. Thank you. Our family with you, because they're all now senior citizens. After all, I'm 86 and my husband's 89. And so Elisa is our mentally challenged on the right, extreme right. And Michelle in the middle is a retired optometrist. And Carice is our oldest. And she suffers from schizophrenia, but she lives successfully by herself in Stockton. So we're very proud of our 3 children who are now living successfully in their own ways. And now it's just the 2 of us, and we don't know how long we're going to be here to do this. So we need your help to tell our stories. Will you do that? Thank you.
I want to share with you a part of my personal story and some concluding remarks, and then we'll open up Q&A. So if you have any comments or questions, feel free to raise them at the end of our presentation.
And we have about 30 more minutes.
Okay.
So we've got plenty of
Thank
time.
you. I can still remember that Sunday morning when my sister, who reached 21, we were able to buy a farm in her name. See, my parents were from Japan, so the law prevented them from purchasing property. But when my sister reached 21, a year before Pearl Harbor, we bought a 20-acre vineyard, a farm. And we were working near the house, and as we came to the house, we took a break. And I remember we turned on the radio to listen to a program to relax. And suddenly, the program was interrupted with a news flash. Japan is bombing Pearl Harbor. I remember saying, what a stupid thing Japan is doing. Who do they think they are, bombing our country? And then within a couple of weeks, we heard rumors and people saying, we helped Japan bomb Pearl Harbor. That because we were Japanese, we were dangerous to America, and that we should round up all the Japs on the West Coast and put them in concentration camps. I remember hearing that rumor going around. I remember we took our belongings that were either Japanese words on it, or Japanese newspapers, or magazines, or the songs, record, Japanese record songs, and we burned them, or buried them, or got rid of them. We had a .22 rifle that we used for hunting jackrabbits. I remember we took that apart and buried it. As an afterthought, I wish we had put it in a box, buried it carefully, and then when we came back, I wish we could have retrieved all that, but we got rid of it because we were in such a panic about these rumors that we would be rounded up and put into concentration camps. I'll never forget May 16, 1942. That was the West Coast relays of the Fresno State at the old campus wrestling stadium. And my favorite star was Cornelius Mormadan from Hanford, who held the world record in pole vaulting back in those days of bamboo pole. And I was hoping that he would break his world record on that day, but I never found out because the Army truck came to the front yard of our farmhouse, and all 9 of us piled in, and we were taken to the Fresno Fairgrounds, which was not what we had seen before. Suddenly it was filled with barracks, with guard towers, with guns pointed at us, and we were being imprisoned at the Fresno Fairgrounds. This is area view of the fairgrounds. All the black those are barracks overflow to the south of Butler Avenue. So there were like maybe 45,000 of us Japanese Americans who were put into these temporary barracks. We were there for 6 months, and then we were shipped by old trains to southeast Arkansas. This is Jerome, Arkansas, where our family, along with many from Central Cal, were sent. The government had a propaganda film that said we were being relocated, evacuated to new homes with more room to live in. There was a lot of baloney, of course. It's all propaganda. It was barracks and shacks. I remember the ground was a lot of clay, so when it rained, we would have to walk on it, and the clay would build under our shoes, so that we were walking stilts. It was so muddy, and 3 weeks after we got there, it turned very cold. It would start to snow. We had no heat in the barracks. My father caught pneumonia, and he died in a makeshift barrack hospital. And this is the funeral service that we had. Many of our relatives were in other camps, Arizona, and so they couldn't join us. It was only those who were in our blocks and close by. There were 33,000 Japanese American soldiers who fought for our country in World War II. 13,500 of them volunteered from behind the barbed wire confinement, which was almost like a contradiction. Here we were dangerous, so we were put in the camps, and yet they accepted us to fight for our country, to give freedom. There were 6,000 of these soldiers who served in the MIS, Military Intelligence Service, and General MacArthur's staff general said that they saved countless Allied lives and shortened the war by 2 years because they could understand the Japanese language, so they intercepted the Japan Army orders to their soldiers, and we got we understood what they were being ordered to do. In 1944, the army needed more soldiers, and so they came into the camps to recruit more Japanese American soldiers. There were 361 young men who were known as the draft resistors of conscience. They said, we're in prison here, free us, let our families go free, and we'd be proud to fight for our country. The government put them in federal penitentiary for, I think, 2 or 3 years. 3 years. This is Mitsuo Endo. She was a 22-year-old secretary from Sacramento. She was a shy, quiet person, but a lawyer for the Japanese American Citizens League back in 1942 wanted someone to use as an argument against the government for imprisoning innocent people. And they told her, we need you to be one of the examples. And so she was told that it would help other people, so she said, okay, I'll do it. But the habeas corpus, that's using a trial, but none of us were given a trial. We were just put into the camps without any trial or accusation, any evidence. And so this lawyer wanted to do a habeas corpus case with Mitsue, and he filed it in 1942, but it wasn't until 1944, December, that it finally got to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court made a unanimous decision that it was wrong for a country to imprison an innocent person without any trial. And so they were going to announce that, but the government found that the announcement was going to come out of the Supreme Court. So the day before the announcement came out, President Roosevelt said all the camps should be closed so that they would be embarrassed by the Supreme Court decision. So beginning 1945, January, all the camps started to be closed. And I think I mentioned when they were ordered to leave, they were given $25 and tickets to somewhere. Many had nowhere to go. 30,000, for example, went to the Chicago area to start life from scratch. 75% of all the lucrative farms of the Japanese American farmers were never recovered. They were lost. And so, somebody may take butts from the lands or from the farms. Our family was released in 1945 from a camp in Arkansas. And we're so grateful to the Sorensen brothers and Ted and Ellie Nielsen for saving our home and our farm. So we had a home to come back to. And we were just a few of the people who had friends who took care of our property. There were others like them, and the racists called them Jap lovers, but they were the true Americans. I'll tell you a quick story about my sister Aiko. When we came back in 45, I was a freshman at our high school, and my sister was a senior, ready to graduate. So about a month after we came back, the announcements came for all the seniors to go to the principal's office to have their cap and gown measurements. So she excitedly joined her classmates, and they went to the office. And when she got there, the principal took her aside and said, we decided we don't want any Japs at our graduation, so you can't graduate here. She felt like she was slapped in her face. It hurt so much that she couldn't tell the family what was happening. And there's more to the story, but I'll just leave it at that. In 1988, Congress passed the Civil Liberty Act, and President Reagan signed it, And the Civil Liberty Act, I think it's the 30th anniversary this year. Part of the wording was a monetary sum in words alone cannot restore lost years or erase painful memories. Neither can they fully convey our national resolve to rectify injustice and to uphold the rights of individuals. But we can take a clear stand for justice and recognize that serious injustices were done to the Japanese Americans during World War II. People have asked me, did being put into the concentration camp, how was it? Did it affect you? And it's a hard question to answer, but several years ago, I interviewed George Aki from Fresno. He was in the theological school in Berkeley, ready to graduate and become a pastor. But the day before graduation, the gates closed behind him at Tanqueran racetrack. And he said when that gate closed behind him, my faith in America died, my faith in God died, and I died. And when he told me that, it resonated deep within me. It was how I felt, but most of us could never put it in those words. But he was telling everyone that it never happened. This is America. America doesn't do things like that. And then it happened, and that's how he felt, he told me. When he told me that, I realized that America was a country we loved so deeply. We respected our government, our leaders, and we just loved America. And then suddenly the country we loved so much was violating us. And I thought, gee, that's just like incest. Someone you love starts doing you in. It's so shameful, and who can believe that? And so we just have to bury those feelings of humiliation, of rejection, and of guilt, which are not ours, but put on by our government. And we tried to prove that we were just as good as any American, even though the government distrusted us. So I think this helps to describe what the concentration camp did to us. The trauma that left us in a state of shock. We had no voice, no one to advocate for us. We could only bury these feelings and try to prove that we were as good as anyone else. And I think many never got over this trauma. Today we're hearing again echoes of 1942. The leaders are exploiting fears and hysteria to advance racism and faithism. So Islamophobia. We have a long history in America and European countries. The belief that Muslims were pagan, heathen, and they're dangerous. And this prejudice from our long past history impacted us when the terrorists were acting in different parts of the world. And people like President Trump said we need to ban the Muslims. And those who were ignorant enough believed him, and they all supported him. So that's happening again, and we don't want that to happen. Racism deliberately uses race to stereotype, dehumanize, create fear and hatred of Middle Easterners, immigrants, and people from south of the border, as was done in 1942 against the Japanese people. And faithism deliberately uses people's faith to stereotype, dehumanize, create fear and hatred, like Islamophobia. And the same thing that happened in 1942 against the Buddhists and the Shintos. See, the Buddhists and Shinto priests were all rounded up by the government, but the Japanese pastors, they weren't rounded up like that. They were Christians, but eventually, because they were Japanese, they too had to go into the concentration camps. We shared with you what really happened here in America. It was not a relocation, it was not an evacuation, it was an imprisonment in America's concentration camp. And we don't want that happening again. And so it's important for us for people to know that, lest they forget history and be condemned to repeat it. I might just mention that when my sister was denied going to her graduation, I know what happened at graduation. They pledged allegiance to the flag with liberty and justice for all. But they wouldn't allow my sister to graduate with her classmates. Those are the things that we are protesting, and those who the athletes are protesting. And we think that they're being un-American. Actually, they're trying to prove our Constitution and our American principles and standards as correct. But because of prejudice and ignorance, they're accused of defacing the flag or our pledge. Okay, I'm going to stop here, and any question, comments you'd like to make, please feel free to do that.
Let's put our hands together first. Questions or comments for the Masadas? Back here, go ahead.
What happened to your sister after she wasn't allowed to graduate?
What happened to your sister? We should have known that.
Well, what happened was she was stunned because she was looking forward to graduation, finally in her own high school. So she, on that very day, she got a telegram saying there's a job for her in another city. So she quit school and took the job, took a Greyhound, and went as a 17-year-old teenager. And but she said, I never thought that when I moved to the new job that I would face more racial remarks and be even spit upon. But that's what happened when she went to her new job. And when she went to this place, Watsonville, they had the newspaper, Haharonian, which had a whole bunch of letters to the editors and articles protesting the Japanese returning to Watsonville area, Santa Cruz area. And so one person wrote saying all the Japanese should go back to their native land, Japan. And so my sister, I guess, had it up to here, so she wrote a letter to the editor saying, well, what was the name?
Cornell. I thought his
She said, Mr. Cornell, I guess we could have gone anywhere, but we came back here to California because this is our native land. You know, that's where we were born, and we were Americans.
Okay, why don't you tell them about the graduation years later?
Oh, let's see, 2006. The principal of Crothers High School heard about my sister, and there was a program where those graduates who could not graduate back in 1942 to 45 could receive honorary diplomas from their high schools or universities. And so the principal contacted me and wanted to honor the Japanese American graduates who could not graduate at their high school. And so we had a ceremony, and the 2006 graduating class was overjoyed in honoring these 16 Japanese American oldsters and stand-ins so that they could march with cap and gown in the ceremony and receive their diploma.
Your sister had died.
61 years later. But my sister had died, so her oldest daughter, who happened to be home at that particular time from a missionary sabbatical, she got in a cap and gown for my sister, and she received a diploma 61 years late.
Thank you. Yes?
Is there any like resentment in your heart for what happened to you and your family?
I didn't hear the second.
Is there any resentment in your
Resentment?
heart?
Well, remember I said earlier how our parents protected us because they didn't want us to grow up with resentment and hate and anger, to be filled with anger. So I never saw my mother packing or getting ready to leave. And so they did protect us. They did protect us. And they would never tell us what happened. And so we children, we just grew up, you know, playing. We were innocent. We don't know all these political things that's going on. And so we just played and had fun as children. And went to school when they organized, and they had clubs and basketball, baseball, football, you know, keep the kids very active and busy.
Years later, as an adult, Marion asked her mother, tell me about camps, and she said, I won't talk about it.
She wouldn't tell me. So we got to find out ourselves.
I think I'll jump the gun and ask the question that everyone usually asks, how did you meet?
Okay, so we can have more time for questions. Real quick, I was a student pastor at Watsonville Church, and I was going to theological school across the Golden Gate Bridge. My roommate double parked for me in San Francisco because I wanted to pick up some Sunday school material for my work as a pastor for the weekend. So I ran up this Board of Christian Education building, and unknown to me, and I didn't know her, she was working there. So I went to pick up some Sunday school material. I picked her up instead.
Well, we'll be married 63 years this year, so I guess it worked out. Question?
Comments, reflections?
I just want to say congratulations to both of you guys for staying strong from you guys' stories and as an individual, and then coming together and staying strong and being able to look back and actually laugh and stuff. It's actually kind of inspiring because most of us, I mean, we struggle in our daily lives, but the way I take it is, I think I have it hard, but you guys went through some serious hard stuff that makes me feel like I can go back out and do my things and it's no big deal, you know what I mean?
Well, I have more hard things to say, but I'll be merciful and not let you know.
But thank you guys so much again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No worries.
So I'm pretty sure right now there's Mexican kids at the border that are being imprisoned right now. What do you think that citizens that know about it and want to help? What do you think can be done to like stuff like that happening right now?
The kids being put in prison, the people crossing our southern borders, and
Well, it's that same racist attitude and ignorance that promotes this kind of action on our behalf. And most of us don't believe that should be happening. They were even putting these children in the similar camps that we were put into. I mean, that's pretty sad. We all agree that what happened in 42 was wrong, but we're repeating again as if that's the way we should handle it.
What can we do about it? He's asking. It's a tough question because change is so hard to, it takes time for change to happen. And we really don't know politically what's behind all this. And there's a lot of things we don't know that the government is doing to children and how they're getting around the laws to do it. See, we're not aware of these things, so it just, hopefully that we can, when the occasion arises where we really need to stand up, that we will stand up when the time comes, all of us.
Well, there's nothing like people power, and so it's hard for me, but we all need to speak up and stand up for justice. And it's wonderful that all these women and new people have been elected, so that, you know, we could have some voice in our country's leadership against what's been happening. So, you know, we're praying that things can happen. It may take a little time, but it's just really sad what's happening.
And if things are being done to you who are facing hardships like we did, to share the stories and let us know what's happening, because sometimes we're too quiet and we don't share what we're experiencing, and we didn't know about it. We didn't tell the public what was happening to us. Look how many years we were quiet and we didn't say anything, because that's just how we were brought up. But now we see the injustice of it, and so that has made us go to the schools and universities to tell you our story, so that you will know that it is wrong, and when it's wrong, we gotta stand up. We gotta stand up for justice. We gotta speak out. It's scary, believe me, it's scary. It's not easy. So sometimes we just have to begin talking with one another, and then our voices will become stronger.
Thank you. Questions, comments?
Any other comments or thoughts, or? If not, some of you probably would like to come and thank them or make a comment personally, not in a big group, so I think they can stay for just a little bit and answer any questions, or if you want to take the time to come say thank you, I'm sure they appreciate that. So please put your hands together.
Thank you for listening.
Nice to meet you.